In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. He called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning on the first day. And God said, "Let there be a vault between the waters to separate the water from water." So God made the vault and separated the water under the vault from the water above it. And it was so. God called the vault sky. And there was evening and there was morning the second day. And God said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let dry ground appear." And it was so. God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it, according to their various kinds." And it was so. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning the third day. And God said, "Let there be lights in the vault of the sky to separate the day from night, and let them serve as signs to mark the sacred times and days and years. And let them be lights in the vault of the sky to give light to the earth." And it was so. God made two great lights, the greater light to govern the day, and the lesser light to govern the night. He also made the stars. God set them in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth, to govern the day and night, and to separate light from darkness. And God saw that it was good, and there was evening and there was morning the fourth day. And God said, "Let the water teem with living creatures. Let birds fly above the earth across the vault." So God created the great creatures of the sea and every living thing with which the water teems and that moves about in it, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful and increase in number, and fill the water in the seas, and let the birds increase on the earth." And there was evening and there was morning the fifth day. And God said, "Let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, the livestock, the creatures that move along the ground, and the wild animals, each according to its kind." And it was so. God made the wild animals according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kinds, and all creatures that move along the ground according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good.
Then God said, "Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all of the creatures that move along the ground." So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the ground." Then God said, "I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food. And to all of the beasts of the earth, and all of the birds in the sky, and all the creatures that move along the ground, everything that has the breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food." And it was so. God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was the morning, the sixth day. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all of their vast array. By the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all of his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all of the work of creating that he had done. This is the word of the Lord.
In 1993, a film took the box office by storm, becoming an overnight sensation and cementing its director Steven Spielberg as a household name. Jurassic Park is one of those movies that so redefined cinema that anyone living through the 90s had to try really, really hard not to see it. It's a story I can safely assume the vast majority of people in this room are not just familiar with. Most of us haven't just seen the film, we've seen it over and over again, which should make it pretty easy to answer the question, what is Jurassic Park about? Until very recently, I thought it was a movie about a science experiment gone wrong and a dinosaur park turned catastrophe and a Tyrannosaurus Rex eating a man out of a bathroom stall. And then I revisited an old familiar story and I realized that the science experiment and the dinosaurs and all the action sequences are just the surface level excitement of the plot, but that is not what Jurassic Park is about. You see, the opening scene of the movie depicts Dr. Grant in an argument with his colleague and romantic interest, Ellie. And he's just had this kind of bristly interaction with a little boy, and she says something to him like, I can't believe you don't want kids. And he responds, I can't believe you do want kids. They're noisy and messy and smelly, and they are expensive. And then from there, a whole crazy action sequence unfolds about a science experiment gone wrong and dinosaurs that are on the loose. And Dr. Grant gets stuck with that very little boy in his own journey towards survival. And we watch as his heart is softened and he falls in love with this kid and then returns to Ellie for the movie's final scene with a completely new view on life and love and meaning. And that is what Jurassic Park is actually about. It's about the way that love pushes us beyond our comfort zones and makes us more. You see, within any great story, you have both the surface level excitement of the plot and you've got the deeper meaning of the director that is braided into all the action sequences. Genesis chapter 1 is one of those stories that has so defined Western culture, it's so shaped modern society as we know it, that you'd have to try really, really hard not to be familiar with at least the broad strokes. The biblical creation story is one I can safely assume very few people in this room just heard for the first time. It's one most of us aren't just distantly familiar with, but have heard over and over and over again, which should make it pretty easy for you to answer the question, what is Genesis 1 about? At first glance, I imagine most of us think it's about the biblical claim of where the sun and moon, land and sea, fish and birds all came from, like an action sequence of how the world as we know it came to be. But what if that's just the surface level excitement of the plot? What if there is a deeper meaning of the director that is woven and braided into all those action sequences? Today we're starting a new teaching series titled Genesis, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It is a piece-by-piece investigation of the sweeping 50 chapters of Genesis that open our Bibles. And because Genesis is both an action-packed, exciting thriller and a deeply meaningful and complex drama, it's going to take us 3 years to get through it. Well, 3 summers, really, I should say, not 3 years, 3 summers. We've broken the book of Genesis into 3 major chunks, and we'll take the summer of 2025, then the summer of 26, then the summer of 27 to get through it. So up for this summer, we're going to tackle the first 11 chapters, and up for today is Genesis 1. And as I'm sure you've noticed, I'm not teaching on my own today, but I get to stand before you alongside one of my very closest friends, Tim Mackie. Now, most will know Tim as the co-founder of the Bible Project, but we know him here at Bridgetown as friend and community member. Tim is, and his family, they're a part of our church community here, and Tim is often helping to shape our teaching behind the scenes and occasionally a touch more directly like today. So Tim, you're a Hebrew Bible scholar. you have devoted the vast majority of your brain's limited real estate to just this one book. So surely you can tell me, are the 6 days of creation literally 24 hours, or are they time periods in some progressive evolution? And is our current archaeological dating system correct, or are we being tricked by a flood that blanketed the earth that just makes things seem older than they actually are? And since we've already brought up dinosaurs, why aren't they showing up in the opening pages of the Bible?
Yep. Yes. Yes. That is exactly right. Hi, everybody. Hello. It's an honor to get to be here. And those are the questions. Those are exactly the questions. And they're important because there are questions. They matter because we matter. Every classroom, whether in churches or seminaries where I've worked through Genesis 1 with a room of people, these are the questions that come up for contemporary, westernized readers of the first page of the Bible, right? And because the questions like that come from our contemporary, cultural knowledge about world origins, about the processes where the universe came from and all that. And that informs why we ask the questions that we do. So those are important questions. However, it's really vital that we don't mistake their importance for us and assume that they were the same questions that the ancient biblical author designed this story to answer. And that's actually one of the most difficult dynamics of learning to read ancient scriptures as God's word to us in the present, is learning that our questions are important, but they are not necessarily the questions that these biblical authors are trying to answer. And so what I'm going to very gently try and do is honor those questions, but at the same time ask us to just tuck them away for the time being. Most of us have an intuition that if you go into the home of someone who's from a totally different culture than your own, and maybe they're bilingual, so they speak your language, so you can have a conversation over dinner, but they're multilingual, they come from a place that's very different from your own. Or if you were to go travel to a culture on the other side of the planet, most of us know that it's at least polite, if not the most open-minded thing to do, to set your own assumptions about the world aside for the course of that conversation, and to open yourself up to a different culture's way of viewing reality and relationships and how you talk about history and meaning and purpose. Most of us know that's like an honorable thing to do. The challenge is that most of us also forget that when we open the pages of the Bible, we are entering a different culture and a different time. We're entering a very unique family from ancient history, the people of ancient Israel. And it's our conviction as a community that God chose and inspired, influenced by God's Spirit, these ancient Israelite authors to write to their own community, and that through these words of ancient Israelites to God's people, God speaks to all of his people, but not by bypassing their cultural heritage, but precisely through it. And so if we really want to work to understand page 1 of the Bible, we have to honor that we are time traveling and we're culture traveling, and we need to learn to see the world through a different set of eyes, and that's what we're going to attempt to do. What questions about the world was Genesis 1 designed to answer? I'm going to submit to you that most of our questions that we think are so important will change, and things that we never thought to think before and questions that we never thought to entertain will all of a sudden become very important to us if we open ourselves to these ancient authors' ways of talking about it. So that's what we're going to try and do in this time that we have left.
Yeah, because if we're going to get at the director's deeper meaning that might actually inform the way that we go on living, we have to begin by allowing the story that we're entering to provoke the questions that it is designed to provoke within us. And that begins by looking at the story's design, right? We pulled out the deeper meaning of Jurassic Park by looking at the story's design, the way Spielberg kind of bookends everything with these telling scenes that are subtle but important on either side of all the action. So if we want to uncover the deeper meaning woven into Genesis 1, we know where to look then, at the story's design.
Exactly. So when you and I want to communicate something really important to us, usually you will stop before you speak. And you'll think about not just what you want to say, but how you want to say it. Like how you want to present it, how you want to design your communication. And the biblical authors that God influenced by His Spirit to give us the books of Scripture were literary geniuses. They were masters of words. And they crafted these stories and poems in Scripture to communicate not only through what they are about, but through how they are designed. And page 1 of the Bible is like an exquisite specimen of literary design. We could actually spend the whole summer just on that, but we're not going to. I'm going to try and take like 90 seconds. You should see it here on a slide here in front of you. Here's one way to think about the design shape of the first story of the Bible, the 7-day creation story. It begins with a summary sentence that just tells you everything that's about to happen in one opening line. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In case you're going to get lost in details about fruit trees and different kinds of livestock and swarmers in the ocean, just, dear reader, here's the blurb. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Verses 2 and following get into the action sequence, as it were, about how that unfolds. And it unfolds over a course of 6 days. And you could probably feel the rhythm of those 6 days as the story was being read aloud. The first 3 days are about God forming. Maybe you noticed that the word separating or splitting got repeated a number of times. God separates light from dark. He separates the waters above from waters below. He separates the land from the seas. And then once God's created the little snow globe, as it were, the cosmos of sky and land and sea, days 4 through 6 are united because they shift to God filling that cosmos with inhabitants. There's the inhabitants in the sky above. There's the sky flyers, the birds, and then the water swarmers in the waters below. And then there's the land animals on day 6, and then the images of God, humans, as the climax of day 6. Forming and filling. How you guys doing? And then, just in case you missed the point, the summary sentence comes along at the end of day 6 to tell you, dear reader, and so the heavens and the earth were finished. They were completed. So it comes around like a bookend and matches the opening line. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Dear reader, the heavens and the earth are finished, but there's a bonus. There's an epilogue. There's the 7th day. And on the 7th day, something remarkable happens that we're going to end by meditating on. But that's the basic design shape. And you'll notice the conclusion matches the beginning. The days match each other in these really interesting, beautiful patterns. We don't have time to get into it all. But the point is, there is a lot of design intentionality, and it reflects an ancient way of seeing the world that moderns like ourselves have so much wisdom to glean from if we can learn to set our questions aside, at least for a time being.
So there's 4 major parts there that we can understand Genesis 1 as broken into heavens and earth, darkness and light, forming and filling, and then 7th day rest. So that's a map for how we're going to pull this thing apart. Let's start with the heavens, plural, and the earth.
Exactly right. Okay. So I say the word heavens, and into your mind comes, man, probably a whole bunch of things comes into your mind. Heavens with an S on it. It's kind of an older English way. We might think of the skies, or you might think of outer space. I say the word earth in contemporary English, and I'm pretty sure 99.9% of us have an image that comes into our mind. Yes, I say earth, and what are you thinking of? You're thinking of like a globe, right? Of a sphere. Here's a little picture here. It's like that's the image in your head, right there, right? Of the earth floating in space. You could think of the space as heavens, and the word earth means earth. When you read the first sentence of the Bible in contemporary English, this is the image, probably, that's in most of our heads. The problem is that the Bible wasn't written yesterday in contemporary English. It was written like over 3,000 years ago in ancient Hebrew. And the phrase that's used in the first sentence of the Bible in ancient Hebrew, Shemayim va'aretz, does not mean that. Here's something really interesting that can kind of put that in perspective. You should see on the right there, yeah, good. What is like a picture of the first publicly televised satellite image of Earth made available to like the viewing public. And do you see the date in the upper right there? What's the date? It says April
1960.
1960. There you go. So we're talking 65 years ago-ish. This image has been available to the human imagination for like less than a human's like long-lived lifetime. This is not how most humans for most of human history imagine the heavens and the earth. The phrase Shemayim va'aretz is the ancient Hebrew phrase used in the first sentence of the Bible. Lucky for us, it appears hundreds of times throughout the Hebrew scriptures, and it has a really clear meaning, and it's not that image. The image would be something more like this. You'll see it here. It's actually very simple. If we were to march outside, take a little field trip, wouldn't that be fun? Take a little field trip, and is it sunny outside yet, or is it still cloudy? Yeah, okay, I think it's gonna get sunny. So if we walk out maybe later today, you would look up and you would see the big blue ceiling up there, yes? Yeah, and the white puffy things floating across it, that's Shemayim, that's the skies. And then if we walked to a park and we could get some grass and dirt underneath our feet, we would look down and we would say, that is the Aretz, that's the land. The first sentence of the Bible is actually saying something that's both simple and deeply, deeply profound. Everything up there and everything down here. Guess what? It did not cause itself. Universes don't just happen to exist. You and I exist right now, at least I think I exist right now. I'm pretty sure you're not all figments of my imagination and that I'm not a figment of yours. So here we are. But here's the thing, like there was a time when I was not. Like I just woke up one day, like I did this morning, except like to my life. And so did you. And the people who are responsible for producing you also just woke up one day by the people who produced them, right? And you with me? And you go back and you can do the same thing for animals, and you can go back and the plants and the rocks and all like that. Like we didn't make ourselves. We came from a whole set of causes and effects that all go back somewhere. And the Bible's phrase to describe that somewhere and someone is, in the beginning, God. God, in the conception of the story of the Bible and the imagination of the biblical authors, God is the only one in all of heaven and earth who does not have a cause or a maker. God's name in the Bible is the one who is, which is just the coolest name in the world. God's existence doesn't depend on anything else. Everything that is depends on God. That's both the simple and profound claim of the first sentence of the Bible. And that first sentence is also trying to tell us something about the little snow globe that God has made when we go outside and we look up and we look down. What we see is two realms, as it were. There's the earth realm, and then there's the sky realm. And here's the thing that's really interesting, is that all of the life and the goodness and the flourishing that we experience here on the land doesn't come from itself. It comes from two main things that are still true today. It comes from the light that comes from above, and it comes from the water that comes down from above. And you put light and water, you put it on the ground, and just so crazy stuff grows. Immense amount of, and then like the creatures that are on the land eat the stuff that grows, and you've got a garden, which is where this story is going. What this first sentence of the Bible is trying to say is this is a tale of two realms, of heaven and earth. And everything that's going to happen on earth happens because of the life-giving source of the heavens that comes down upon the land. Earth depends for its very existence on heaven in the first page of the Bible, which raises this interesting question about, well, if God created the heavens and the earth, like where is God in the heavens and the earth? Is God in heaven? Well, I could go to one part of the Bible, for example, Psalm 11, and I would read exactly that. The Lord's in his holy temple. The Lord is on his throne. Where is it? It's in the heavens. And he looks down on everybody and observes what everybody's doing. It's kind of terrifying if you think about it. So one way to talk about God's location in heavens and earth is to talk about God being high above and beyond. However, the biblical authors know exactly what they're doing. They know that when we're talking about the author of all that is, that God, the creator, is not in heaven and earth, just like Steven Spielberg is not in Jurassic Park. But yet Jurassic Park would not exist without Steven Spielberg. And so in a way, he's both above and beyond, but he's also present and within every millisecond and micrometer, like of Jurassic Park. Are you guys with me here? So something like that is going on here. And what you can watch is super interesting. The biblical authors know that when they talk about God being in heaven, it's a metaphor for talking about God as above and beyond as the author of all that is. And sometimes the biblical authors will get meta, and they'll just name that fact. Like when King Solomon builds the temple in Jerusalem, and he invites the creator God to come live in this little house that he made for God. And he says this classic line. He says, listen, God, the heavens, man, even the heavens of the heavens, whatever that means, they cannot contain you. The heavens are what we can see, but because God is so above and beyond, surely the heavens must have their own heavens. And then those heavens would have the heavens above them, and those have, are you guys with me? We're trying to shatter our concepts of reality. We're shattering the boxes that we put God within. God doesn't exist within heaven and earth. God is not a being in the universe. God is. And God is the author of all that is. And everything that happens here on earth is sourced by the infinite life of heaven. That's what Genesis 1:1 is trying to communicate to us.
And that means that the proper response to the very first revelation on the very first page of the Bible isn't just to say, oh, this is how God created all that I know and experience. It is to say that everything we experience in this natural world is meant to point us to the Creator behind and beyond all of creation. The proper response would be something like David in Psalm 19, who prays, the heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech, night after night they reveal knowledge. Their voice goes into all of the earth, and their words to the ends of the world. This is a poetic way of saying everywhere I look in God's natural world, it is an invitation to behold the image of the Creator who is behind and within and beyond all of it.
The two realms and the tale of the two realms then of heaven and of earth. Spoiler alert, heaven and earth are made for each other. In fact, they're gonna get married at the end of the story. And everything that you and I experience on earth is itself a reflection and a gift, an outpouring of God's generous heavenly life and love. This is the conception of reality that is underneath the prayer that Jesus invited us to pray, which is, shall we just start it together? Our Father, who is in heaven, hallowed be your name. May your kingdom come, may your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Although these realms are distinct, they are not separate, and they are made to become closer and closer eventually till they become one together. But that's to get ahead of ourselves to the seventh day.
And that takes us from the heavens and the earth to darkness and light.
So these are images that are just immediately clear to all of us, yes? No explanation needed. Stare down at verse 2 of your Bible, and you will find a riddle staring out off the page at you. You're going to find a description of what you could call the blank canvas that God starts with. You could call it the pre-creation state. It's how this action gets started. And what you're told is two things. One is that the earth is formless and empty, whatever that might mean. We're about to talk about it. And then also that darkness was over the surface of the deep. And deep there means deep, like waters, bottomless waters. So these are two ways that the ancient biblical authors are describing non-creation. the opposite of order and life. The Hebrew phrase formless and empty, whether that's meaningful to you, I don't know, most of us, I don't know. When I ask my kids what this sentence means to them, they just give me the wildest descriptions. And that would probably be true if I got to ask each of you. The Hebrew phrase is tohu vavohu. Yes, it rhymes. I'm not going to quiz you. There's no incentive for you to memorize this. I can't give you an F or something if you don't remember it, but you should remember it because it's cool, because it rhymes. Tohu vavohu. If I wanted to translate it in a way that caught the rhyme or alliteration, I might use the English words unordered and uninhabited, or wild and waste. What we're talking about here are words of ancient Israelite vocabulary of the desert. In fact, tohu is used many times in the Hebrew scriptures to describe an empty, lifeless desert. So that first little phrase, the earth was formless and empty, is biblical vocabulary that's describing the pre-creation state, the blank canvas as like a desolate, empty wilderness. But then look at the next phrase. Darkness was over the surface of the deep waters. So here we're envisioning some sort of cosmic ocean of nothingness and no order where nothing can hold together in any shape or form. And these are the two images to describe the blank canvas with which God begins by breathing his spirit into the emptiness and by speaking his word. Now that two sets of images to us seem like opposites. Like the desert is a place where there's like no water and life, and the ocean is a place where there's like too much water, right? But these two images, even though they seem opposites to us, are put right along next to each other in the first page of the Bible, because they're inviting us in to meditate on something deeper, on what it means for there to be nothing. And then out of that nothingness, where there can be no life and no order, God breathes and God speaks, and it results in a garden.
Keep going. You're doing great.
So some of you might be familiar with this phrase that's really important in the history of Christian belief and theology of creation out of nothing. And you might look at these two descriptions and be like, a desert and an ocean is something. I thought the Bible began with God creating out of nothing. And so part of the challenge there is, once again, these are our questions. And the concept of nothing, which is almost impossible to imagine and describe, actually, the concept of nothing has a really fascinating and interesting history. Begins with Greek philosophy and it runs right on through, up through the scientific revolution and modern physics and the present. And none of that was in the minds of the biblical authors. They didn't have a concept of nothing. The ocean and the desert were their concepts of nothing. A total void where no life can live unless the life of heaven is poured out upon it to bring order and life. And that's exactly what day one is about, as God speaks into the darkness and penetrates it with his light.
Yeah, and if you're not already making this connection, isn't this how the Apostle John speaks of the life of Jesus coming into the world? Right? He was the Word made flesh, the breath, the light that shines out in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. The way that John tells the Christmas story is by referring back to Genesis 1 to say the Creator who created out of nothing in the very beginning has now entered into the formless void of what creation has become to go on creating here among us. You see, this is what happens when we enter into the story on its terms rather than impose our terms on it from without. John is able to look around his world and say, oh my word, the story that God is telling is the story that I'm living within. And I can even interpret what God is doing in the present moment when I allow him to be the storyteller that informs my imagination. That's where this whole thing is headed, but we do have a little bit more to the design before we get there. So let's now move to forming and filling.
Yes, how you guys doing? Isn't this the most interesting stuff in the world? We're gonna make Bible nerds of you yet, trust me, trust me. There's 6 days that grab most of our attention. It's really obvious, the structure and flow of the 7-day creation story. There's 6 days of God working. As I said earlier, days 1 through 3 are about God creating the snow globe, as it were, separating light and dark. That's day 1. God's own light penetrates the darkness. But it's really interesting, notice that God confronts the darkness with his own light, but God doesn't eliminate the darkness totally. Did you notice that? But what God does is, as it were, contain it and then make darkness work within a purpose and a rhythm. So now every one of the days of God working is marked by evening and there is morning. So there's wisdom here. There's something about that the darkness is not a threat to God. He can speak his own light that contains it. But at the same time, creation, as it goes on a journey from nothingness into greater and greater union with God's own life, it goes through these cycles of darkness, and then a new sunrise, and then a new day that's full of separation and growth and development, and then there's night, and then there's sunrise again. There's deep wisdom here about the pattern of creation, that the darkness is not darkness to God, and the darkness is a threat to us and to our life, but God can take the darkness and make it work within a grander story leading to the garden and to the 7th day rest.
Hang on before you keep going. The pattern of creation is telling of the pattern of redemption. Don't miss this. The way that God works to create life within you involves patterns of light and dark. And the darkness is not dark to him. That means at least this much, that your life of redemption in partnership with God will involve cycles of light and dark. And that God's work within you is not hindered by the darkness. Be comforted by that, family. Keep going, Professor.
On day 2, God separates waters above and below. This is very counterintuitive to us at first.
This is my favorite part, honestly.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, I love this.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's go on a field trip virtually in our minds outside, all of us together. Here we go, class. And we look up at the blue thing, and you could ask, why is it blue? And have you ever noticed that this blue kind of hue that it is actually the same color as a vast body of water with the sunlight shining on it? Have you ever noticed that before? And have you ever noticed, it's really crazy, that when the white puffy things like brush up against the face of the blue ceiling, what often happens to them? They get really dark because they're filling up with what? Where'd that water come from? It's because there's an ocean of water up there, according to the biblical authors. That's how actually most ancient people imagined the world. And so that water comes down from above and it's being held up there. What on earth holds it up there? The word of God, because God tells it to every second. Unless he doesn't, and then you call that the flood. And then God says, yeah, I'm never going to do that again. And he holds it back up there.
Yeah.
Yep, actually in a few weeks, you'll get there. So the water's below, you can go to the driest place on the land from our point of view, and you can find the right spot and dig down deep enough, and what will you hit? Water. There's water under there. There's water above, there's water below. Days 2 is about God separating the waters above and the waters below vertically. Day 3 is about God separating the land from the waters horizontally. And then bonus, day 3, plants shoot up out of the ground. You get plants and you get light and you get lots of plants, right? Did I say that right? You get light and then you get water.
Yeah.
Then you get plants. Okay.
Honestly, I zoned out for a second. I didn't know for sure. It happens to everyone.
That's exactly right. So notice how days 1 through 3, God creates the snow globe, and then the last thing is all about these plants that just start growing up out of the ground, and specifically fruit plants, like plants with fruit that have seed in them. And then they drop their fruit onto the ground, and it's so wild because, right, nothing's like caused itself to exist, right? Because God's the one who is. But once God sets plant life going, it's like it just goes on forever. And every plant grows up, and then before it dies, it deposits in the ground its own future self of like auto-regenerating. And so it's as if days 1 through 3 culminate in this picture of God's own infinite fountain of life within God's own self that he gives as a gift that's imaged for us in every like annoying blackberry bush, right? A raspberry bush that like won't stop growing and taking over your deck and something. But there is an opportunity staring at that blackberry bush before you chop it down to say, thanks be to God. It's an image of God's own. He's packed creation with so much potential in life.
Yeah.
It's just unleashing from every little pocket and corner. And it is an image of God's own life. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, it makes me think of the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest, very near where we're all sitting right now. So in 1980, as many of you will be familiar with, Mount St. Helens literally blew its top. A volcanic eruption that rained ash down on Portland, obliterating the lush green forest around it to just this singed, blackened ash. And plenty of you probably have memories of that personally. And if you were to go hiking in the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest today, you would see that 45 years later, a lot of it has reclaimed its natural beauty, and there are other sections that no human being is allowed to set foot in. Why not? Because it is being protected for this natural process called reforestation, which is a scientific term for creation heals itself better than anyone could ever even help it heal. Don't touch it. It's healing itself. Isn't that fascinating? That if all of creation tells us something about the Creator and is meant to point us beyond it to Him, that the way that God has designed the world is that the trees and plants and seeds, that there is life within them that is so resilient and sophisticated that even the best scientist in the world trying to help is not as helpful as just leaving it alone. And if that tells us about the one who is redeeming you, that means at least this much, that your great hope is not in your ability to keep in step with the Spirit's invitations to you. Your great hope is that the life of God is so stubbornly resilient and good that He is producing life within you as you simply let Him do His work. Isn't that good news? Yeah.
Days 4 through 6.
Sorry. Every once in a while,
Nothing to be sorry
I thought someone should preach. Proceed.
I will. Days 4 through 6. God fills this heavens and earth and the sea below with creatures. The stars above, it's so cool, the whole thing that we could do on the stars. God delegates and shares with the lights above the thing that God did on day 1. Who separated light from dark on day 1? God did. And then God gives or shares that responsibility to the lights. So now the lights become images or symbols of God's own light. In fact, that's what they're called in verses 14 and following. Let the lights in the sky be as symbols or signs. Every light that you see lighting up the sky is shining with, as it were, borrowed light. Doing something on God's behalf that God gave it as a gift and a responsibility to do. And those rulers, because notice at the end of the description of the lights, they were called to govern or rule. They are the rulers above who govern day and night because God loves to share, apparently. And those rulers above mirror the rulers below, who were like the climax of the story and of day 6, which are the humans. Let us make human in our image and according to our likeness. Genesis 1, verse 26. And notice, what has God commissioned the humans to do? What does God share with them? Rulership, stewardship, or responsibility. So what God is to the whole, like, cosmos, now humans are to the land. This is so profound. The whole history of our conception of human life as being of ultimate sacred value begins right here in this sentence from this story in the Bible. This is the Bible's contribution to the history of human thought and ethical values. Every single human being is here being commissioned as a king and queen, as it were, to become an embodiment of God's wisdom and God's love and God's creativity, to bring order out of chaos, to allow, we can't create life, but we can facilitate now its flourishing and its spreading and its protection. And that's what human beings are given here as a gift to do, mirroring the order of the rulers above, but now as not just signs or symbols above, but actual living, as it were, embodiments or incarnations of God's own life. It's such a remarkable portrait of human beings that every human being that you have ever met is a king and a queen with a unique reflection of the Creator God's wisdom and love within the world. And that's how day 6 comes to its climax.
Yeah, I don't know how you feel when you come into God's presence. I don't know how you imagine it is that He looks at you. But the first page of the Bible says royalty. That's what He calls you. That's how He honors you. That's what He dignifies you with. And even today, as you come into His presence, that's who He says that you are. Let's keep moving. I don't want to miss out on the seventh day rest.
So as you were hearing the story read aloud, part of its design shape is that repetition. It's actually the most repeated thing in days 1 through 6. Did you notice how each day concluded with this phrase, there was evening, and then there was morning? Remember that darkness to light pattern in the rhythm of creation. And you can trace it through day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, and then you get to the 7th day, which stands outside of the 6. It's totally different. God doesn't do any work on the 7th day, right? God does a number of things that are different. God blesses the 7th day. And throughout the story so far, God's blessing has appeared 2 other times, and it's always about multiplication. So the 7th day is a kind of day that's meant for ongoing expansion, enlargement. God rests on the 7th day, not because God's tired, God's the one who is, but God chooses to sit back and enjoy creation together with His image bearers and the infinite life that pours from Him, from heaven to earth as a reflection of praise and glory, to sit back in the feast of the garden on day 7. And then the third thing God does on day 7 is to make it holy. It's what Jesus prayed that we would do for the Father's name. Hallowed be your name. May your name be treated as holy. The 7th day is an utterly unique day set apart to the celebration of the infinite life and creative love of God, the 7th day. And when you get to the end of the description of the 7th day, you've been trained 6 times over. What do you expect to hear? How will the 7th day close? What do you expect? And there was evening, there was morning. Look down, look down. What's missing on the 7th day?
Night.
There is no sunset on the 7th day. Remember, God blessed it. It's meant for expansion, for ongoing, for enlargement. This story on page 1 of the Bible is not simply telling us about something that happened in the past. It's actually giving us the pattern of God's whole purpose for all of history and creation.
Hang on. Before you get there, anyone remember another time in the Bible where there's no night?
good Bible trivia right
The
there.
last page.
The last page.
The first page is the last page. Complete it for us.
Yeah,
Go.
that's exactly right. Yes. Yeah, on the last page of the Bible, this is good homework to do, right? Go out for lunch, yeah? Read the last page of the Bible, because that's a normal thing that people do, right?
Totally.
And match it to the first. And what you'll notice is that the culmination of the whole biblical story on the last page, there is no night and there is no ocean. There is no sea. The chaos is over. It's pure, infinite, ongoing garden and feasting and light. And the hint of that is already there on page 1 in the fact that the sun never sets on the seventh day. This creation was called out of nothingness and onto a journey of growth and maturity and development to share in the very life and rest and joy of God. And that's the portrait. There's going to be a lot of nights, and a lot of them are going to be dark. And there's going to be separation, and there's going to be things that feel like they're the opposite of creation. But the page 1 of the Bible is just staring at us saying, dear reader, know this. All of creation is on the way to the seventh day. And that's where this train is going.
Yeah, so let me just ask you one more time. What's Jurassic Park about? You know, for any story to be a great story, it has to be relatable. That means if Jurassic Park is a story about a science experiment that went wrong in a dinosaur amusement park that turned into a catastrophe and a Tyrannosaurus Rex that eats a man out of a bathroom stall, then it's an entertaining escape from the world that you and I actually live in. It's a story that no one can really relate to, but if it's a story about the way that love pushes us beyond the comfort zone that we've settled into so that it can make us more, then it's a story that everyone can relate to. Everyone can stand up in the movie theater, walk back out into the world that they actually live in, and incarnate. It's a story that doesn't invite you to escape, but to become. And it means this, that a great storyteller is one that is not just familiar with the world that they're asking you to imagine, they're familiar with the story that you are actually living in today. Genesis 1 is that. It's not just an epic story about how God created the stars, mountains, and fish. It's a story about love and meaning. It's a story about why your days matter and what they're for. It's a story not just to be entertained by, but to incarnate, to stand up from this place, to walk back into your ordinary life and to live into with greater freedom. And so here is the commissioning that is being given you on the Bible's first page. You're welcome here. You have work to do. And the destination you're headed for is seventh day rest. Let's land there. First, you're welcome here.
Yeah, I was telling Tyler as we were planning for this teaching, I was out on a walk one morning thinking about Genesis 1, as I do. But also praying, like, what does God want to say to us through page 1 of the Bible? And the phrase that just lodged in my mind that I could not get out is the phrase, you are welcome here. When each of us walked into the room this morning, you may or may not have felt welcome right here in this room. Some of you feel great, like you know your people, you come in, you give hugs, you receive hugs, you feel at home. But that's not how everybody feels in this room. This room is a place of deep unsurety and insecurity for others of us. And that's actually true of every one of us, of some room somewhere in this world that we walk into not knowing if anybody sees us, if anybody knows us, and if anybody cares. And that's just rooms. Many of us were brought up in families where you were not certain at all if you were welcome in the family. Many of you have gone on, into the jungles of junior high or high school, and I don't know if anybody's welcome in those environments. In your workplace, there are many people who've experienced most of their life feeling unwelcomed. And page 1 of the Bible, I don't know how else to say it, but even if no one in your life has ever made you feel welcome. You need to know the page 1 of the Bible is staring at you, and through its words, your Creator is staring at you, telling you in no uncertain terms, you are welcome here. If you're a human image of God and you exist and you're hearing the story, you are welcome here. You are one of billions of ways the infinite life and love of God can be uniquely reflected through the history of human life. And the capacities and the opportunities that God has given to each one of us are a very mirror of God's own life and love, according to page 1 of the Bible. And I don't know how else to summarize that except to say that you and I, we're welcome here. The universe does not always feel like a welcoming place to most of us. And if we don't feel welcome here, or if you've never felt welcomed by the people in your life, page 1 of Genesis is telling you that, well, you're surrounded by humans then who just are really out of sync with God, what God knows and has destined you for. You're welcome here.
And you have work to do. And the work that you have to do is creative. It is rooted in the creativity of God as revealed on the Bible's first page, meaning all creative work, it begins in the imagination, right? It starts with the capacity to imagine something that does not yet exist in the world around me and to bring it into being. The kind of creative work that you are called to invites you to imagine a world around you that looks more like the image of the Creator. Something that is only possible that if he who is within you really is greater than he who is in the world. And sure, we can imagine that on a grand scale, right? We can imagine the eradication of global hunger, or a world of shalom rather than violence, or the rezoning of our city, or the redistribution of funds within our public school system, and so on and so forth. But I want to challenge you to imagine it specifically in the day-to-day life that you inhabit. To imagine the image of the Creator in one relationship that you're passively existing in, that God is saying, what if I can form that relationship and fill it with my life? For one chunk of time in your daily or weekly routine that is unformed and unfilled, and God is saying, what if you prioritize that? What if you began to talk to me about that environment, that space, that part of your life? How might I be able to form it and fill it with you? Or for one resource that you possess that you're currently saving or keeping for yourself, and God says, well, what if we could spread that out across my creation to share it with others? How might that become a medium through which I could form the world around you and fill it with my life? Oh, creative God, what work do you have for me to do in the conditions of my life as it is today?
The last sentences of Genesis 1 are about the seventh day. It's actually the beginning of Genesis 2. But it's about the destination of the seventh day rest. This story is trying to tell us something that is so difficult to believe. As we sit through the long history, through the train wreck of human history, there are nights that we endure that seem so long, right? There are nights that some of us are still sitting through right now, and it actually feels as if that's the only thing that has ever been, is night. And it might seem like the craziest thing to believe, but Genesis chapter 1 is staring at you. Your Creator is staring at you through the words of Genesis 1, promising you that this ship of creation that left its harbor of nothingness and is going on the journey cannot but reach its destination in the seventh day rest. It may not seem like it. The nights may seem so very dark and devoid of life. But Genesis 1 stands there as God's promise that creation is destined for the seventh day rest where the sun never sets. And we cannot tie a bow on that. We can't tie a bow on what's happening in your life, in your story. But this story is meant to give us hope. That not even the most catastrophic human violence or abuse, the most tragic things that strike our world, and the biblical story is going to go deep into the tragedy and violence and abuse of human existence. But right there at the conclusion of the first story is a promise that our ultimate destination is seventh day rest. And I don't know about you, but that is about the only thing that helps me wake up each day and face whatever dark nights that are ahead or that we're currently facing. And so please hear, community, that our destination is the seventh day rest.
Yeah, I'm reminded of a story Jesus tells in Luke 12 where he says that his kingdom works this way, that it's like a master whose servants come in at the end of the day after all of the hard work is complete. And they're just about to set the table so that the master can eat. And then the master gets up from the table and he says, no, you sit down. I'll dress myself to serve. And I have a feast to offer you. That's where we're headed. I think Genesis 1 leaves me with the reaction of just, oh my word. How great is our God? I think there's not enough preaching in the church today that simply ends with, oh my word. How great is our God?
Thanks for joining the Bridgetown family as we engage in this teaching series. To learn more about the life of our church and how you can get involved, visit bridgetown.church/welcome. If you're interested in contributing financially to Bridgetown Church and to our ministry, you can do that at bridgetown.church/giving. Wherever you're joining us from, we hope this resource blesses you and encourages you to be with Jesus, become like Jesus, and do what Jesus did.